Hey there, how's it going? Welcome or welcome back in case this is not your first time because you've been watching the shorts on the channel. I'm excited to have you. So, I guess congratulations are in order because you're preparing for your move to either the US, Canada, UK, or some country in Europe. Or maybe you have a brother or friend in that position. Feel free to share this with them. I created this checklist to help other people in the same exact shoes I was about 5 years ago when I resumed for graduate school in the US, right before the pandemic. I'm well aware of the challenges, that can come with such a move and also the opportunities. So I'm here to share this checklist with you to help you explore those opportunities effectively, have a seamless move. Do stick around as we dive right into the checklist. So, the first thing I have on the checklist is weather. Believe it or not, this reel is Dallas, Texas. So, this was my first time in Dallas, and I had gone looking for good weather and was met with a serious snowstorm. Like, even moving around in vehicles was very difficult and uncomfortable to say the least. So, I ended up leaving, and this was me leaving and just staring down at the snow and being so disappointed. So, you know how they say there's an off chance that something might happen? Yeah, you want to prepare for the climate, where you'll be, the location, think about the region as well, think about the off chances, the type of weather they get, like 10% of the time, and just prepare, be knowledgeable about it, talk to people who already live there. One other way to prepare is by buying comfortable clothing for the weather you'll be meeting in the location you'll be staying, so that you're covered and it doesn't get in the way of your work or school. And it's important to prepare because even when you arrive, checking the weather is part of your daily routine. I mean, if you don't check the weather, you'd be so wrong. So yeah, when I started living abroad, I had to get very used to checking the weather. Locals also like to talk about the weather. So, well, the weather is kind of a big deal, and you just want to be ready to um, face it and to talk about it frequently. I came from a place where there are only two seasons, dry and wet. But you find that in places like America, there's fall, there's spring, winter, summer. Yeah, you just want to be mindful of the nuances where you're going to be living. So prepare for the weather. So, the next thing I have on the checklist is flights or accommodation benefits. So, when you're moving, it's a big deal, right? You're leaving, your hometown and moving, flying across tens of thousands of miles, maybe, to another country, whether it's Canada, Europe, or America. And it's a big deal. So, you want to check and make sure you're getting all mobility benefits with your employer. If it's a school, you want to check to see if they have a small fund or some sort of petty cash arrangement that allows them to support your move. Um, Maybe with flights, if you're a worker or an employee trying to resume work, maybe they have some sort of temporary accommodation arrangement they can make for you for a week, a month, till you're settled in the new location and can then find housing on your own. So you want to check with your school or your company to make sure you're not leaving anything on the table. And I'll tell you another short story of mine. So when I was to move to the US, I had gotten a scholarship, it was a full scholarship for a master's program with stipend actually included. So I wasn't really looking for anything, right? But I faced an issue making payments for my flights. So I had reached out to the university to say, oh, I had this issue with my flights, to see how they could help me. And What? They were like, don't worry about it. We're going to cover it. So that was how I also got free flights to resume school. Yeah, all this to tell you, don't sleep on this one. Always ask questions, whatever it's unclear. Try to clarify, ask other people. Even if it hasn't been done before, who knows? They might do it for you because my university told me actually not to tell anyone. But technically, I'm not telling anyone, right? But now you know that you can ask for what doesn't seem readily available and just, there's no harm in asking. Take a chance. And who knows, you might get a good benefit that will help you settle into your new location. So ask away. Now to the next item on our checklist, which is housing. So, where are you going to live when you arrive at your destination? Housing can make or mar your experience. And I think there's several considerations to have with regards to this subject. So much so that I think it deserves its own deep dive video. Let me know if you'll be interested in that video, and I'm happy to make it. But for now, let's look at some considerations. So, if you're moving with a family, you'll probably be looking at a house. Um, if you're an individual, you might be looking at an apartment like the one in the reel currently showing. I think there are things to note when you're moving abroad. Some houses are really old, and that can affect like the heating and cooling system that it has. Um, in the UK and most of Europe, most houses do not have air conditioning, so that's something to be mindful of. In the US, the older houses use gas, which is cheaper in terms of your utility bills. But where it's electricity, you can expect your utility bills to be a lot more expensive. And housing is something that you really need to ask somebody. So if you know someone who is already at the location you'll be moving to, I think this is definitely a subject you want to consult them on. And you might be better off just getting an apartment where they currently live or getting a house in an area that they're already familiar with. So be sure to confirm house. The fourth thing is culture, really important. In fact, super important. You need to keep an open mind and be willing to learn, unlearn, relearn, and adapt to the cultural context in which you'll be living. I remember my experience in a small Midwestern town in the US where I'll pass by strangers on the street and they'll give you this super quick split-second smile. And before you know it, their faces have returned to normal. I thought that was the most atypical thing in the world. I also had this really interesting experience the first time I was in the UK, where like bus attendants, a server at the restaurant would say, "Oh, here you go, darling," or "That's it, love." So the use of those words were a bit strange to me because those are words reserved for really intimate relationships where I had come from. And be prepared for this. Even within a locality, you might find that there are subtle differences here and there in culture. It makes sense to begin to connect with colleagues, work based networks, student bodies, and friends and families who are more familiar with the environment you're moving to and who understand the culture of the locals better. Key things to note: graduate school settings in these countries usually involve a lot of class discussions and group projects. So you might have to interact with other cultures beyond the locality as well. Two, for workplace culture, this can differ from office to office. So consider reaching out to your recruiter or colleagues of similar descent in your office to learn more. I once worked with a French colleague who saw me refuse alcohol, and he said that in France, people would think, I'm a recovering alcoholic. So I have like a drinking problem. So be sure to be aware of the workplace culture, the culture of the people you're working with, so that you can collaborate, seamlessly with them. Another thing to notice is that usually small town have cultural nuances versus suburban areas and even big cities. So you'd see little differences here and there that might be subtle or not so subtle. And I would say, lastly, be prepared to share, right? Let people know how you yourself were socialized, your own cultural orientation, not in a rigid way, but in just in a bit to share knowledge and show that you're curious about learning. It can also be a powerful way to connect with people when you share more about yourself. And it's also important to prevent misunderstanding. So, those are my 2 cents about culture. Be willing to understand, adapt, and be prepared to share, and explain yourself. If you make mistakes, apologize, and forgive yourself. Be gentle and kind towards yourself as well. So, let's move on to the 5th thing I'll be discussing, which is communication. So, by communication, I'm referring mainly to speaking and writing, both to English and non-English speakers. Now, I understand that most of these countries have a majority of English speakers, but since you'll be going to school or going to work, it's important to understand the composition of English and non-English speakers at your school, in your class, or, at your place of work. So you want to find out about the class profile of your student body, the diversity profile of your team, your workplace, and this will help prepare you adequately with respect to communication. So for speaking, I think it's less about the accent or trying to sound like another person, but more about understanding stress patterns and enunciation, especially in English. So for instance, if I said communicate to an English speaker, this might be difficult for them to understand because I'm stressing Kate, communicate, right? But the right pronunciation is with the stress on mu. So I should be saying communicate, and then an English speaker would understand me, right? So in the US, places like the US and Canada, if I say water, I might not be understood readily, right? It might take a few times for them to understand. So me saying it a few times for them to understand. But if I said water, they're more likely to understand because US people in the US and Canada have a problem with pronouncing T's when it comes in between words. But if you said water in the UK or, most cases in Europe, you'll probably be understood. So in the US, in Canada, try and understand that if you say water better, you'll be better understood, right? Also, writing is a really critical skill, whether you're an employee or you're in school. Please learn how to write. Okay, so things to do, you can hire a speech or writing coach, take courses at your school. You can ask to see if there are professional development benefits that you can use to improve your skills in these areas. Also work with your friends and colleagues to improve, watch movies, pay attention to podcasts, webinars, online courses that can help you improve your skills in these areas. So remember, we've gone through 5 things in your checklist. So weather, flight and housing benefits, housing, culture, and communication. I have a few more items on my checklist. I'll share in a follow-up video. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified and let me know which of these items really stood out for you and anything else you'd like to get my perspective on. Till next time, see you in the next video.